Hello and welcome to What's Coming and How to Prepare for Mytech's 2024 IT Forecast. We're a little bit late in getting this one out this year. And so, one of the things about that is we have a little bit more information about what's actually started to already happen in 2024. So we are going to touch on that. But thanks for joining us. This is the third year that we've been working on forecasts. And so we always like to do a quick review of how we've done and trying to give some people visibility about what to think about in the upcoming year. Of course, not all this is going to be applicable to everybody, but moving on, I want to show you, here's some of the quick takes we're going to get. First of all, we've identified 4 business impacting kind of categories or items relative to technology that we want to share with you that we're seeing in lots of different ways. I'm sure you're seeing them too, but we'll share those with you. There's only a couple in particular we're going to call out today relative to items that we want to keep on your radar. Some of this stuff is going to be applicable to people this year, but we feel like it's going to be more ubiquitous, more applicable, generally speaking, into 2025. And we'll hit that right at the end of the session. So here's what we're going to talk about. Before we get into the next slide, this is a new platform that we've been using to hopefully give a better experience relative to the folks joining us. So thanks for joining us, by the way, live. We have a Q&A panel, and there's an attendee chat. So either one of those, we're going to be monitoring those. So if you want to do some chatting, chat away. If you want to ask a question, use the Q&A. Either one will work, and we'll be paying attention to it. So throughout the session, if you've got questions or thoughts, go ahead and throw them out there. Stephanie is producing behind the scenes, and if she can answer the question there, she will. Otherwise, she'll interject and poke me, and I'll do my best to give you an answer. With that said, I always like to start with just 1 minute about Mytech. Look, we are a business and technology consulting organization that works with small and medium businesses. That's it. We don't work with the enterprise. We don't even work with the upper mid market. So what we found over the last 23 and a half, almost 24 years of being in business is that we have a proven IT strategy that really helps to deliver consistent and reliable results for our clients. It's not the only strategy, and we're not even saying it's the best strategy. We just have one that we built our entire organization around and we know delivers results to hopefully help remove IT challenges for you so you can do what you're great at, which is focusing on serving your customers and also being more adaptable to the things like what we're going to talk about today, because we all face business challenges, technology and otherwise, and having a system that you don't have to worry about as much for the proven strategy allows you to spend more time and adapt to that. Putting that all together, our clients achieve 4 times more value and productivity from their IT investments. I know that's not why you're here today to talk about that, but if you do want to talk about that, just raise your hand. We'll be happy to follow up with you and have a chat, see if that might be a good fit for you. Otherwise, let's dig into the content, the 2024 IT forecast agenda. So my formatting evidently changed in that first bucket there, but we're going to touch base on the 2023 forecast. How did we do? We're going to then hit on the 4 business impacting technologies in 2024 that we want to go through. Like, again, a brief look to 2025. There's only a couple honorable mentions there at the end, and then we will open it up for more extensive Q&A at the end if that's something that if we have questions that come up afterwards. All right, so let's look back at 2023. Now, again, this forecast was done at the end of 2022. I think we did it in November or December. And, multi-factor authentication, it's not that was only in 2023. It's been a thing for a long time, but it's really been pushed hard. Cyber liability is pushing it hard. In fact, going to the end of 2022, cyber liability insurance was not even allowing you to, they're like, don't even submit your application unless you have MFA in place for a lot of insurers. So that's definitely something that was there. Endpoint detection and response, that's another one that's been around for more than just 2023, but it was really being pushed hard and built as a requirement for cyber liability insurance. So that was definitely something that became very much a reality for everyone across the board in 23. Now, cyber liability insurance, this one, I have a check there because we believe that, and based on everything that we're seeing in the industry, every organization should evaluate and we believe should have very specific cyber liability insurance. Now, with it check there, doesn't necessarily mean that everyone has it. In fact, we know that not everyone has it. It's complicated, but it's not. One of the things I always like to mention is that it's different than like if you have a general insurance liability policy with a cyber rider on it. Again, I'm not an insurance broker or anything like that, but cyber liability is a very specific insurance that we would strongly suggest you get to help you cover, because if you ever have an incident that you need to deal with, your cyber rider will not cover it. And if you don't have cyber liability, it's going to be very expensive for you. And that could really make the difference between staying in business or not because of the costs involved and the ability to respond. So that's all. I'll touch on cyber liability a little later because that's actually one of the other things that there's some nuances to that in 2024 that we want to make sure people are aware of. But we did put incident response planning in there because we were seeing in 2022 that cyber liability insurers as well as incidents were on the rise. And it was happening to more companies. And just because over time, it's more likely to happen to you if you haven't had it happen. And having an incident response plan puts you in a way better position to respond to those if something like that happens to your organization. And cyber liability is now starting to prescribe certain things you can and cannot do in responding to an incident. And so we believe that making sure that you build an incident response plan so that you're not trying to figure out how to respond to a problem while you're in the midst of the problem, which may or may not be in alignment with the cyber liability insurance policy you have or don't have or have in place. And so that was something that we've seen, and we've seen some organizations do this, but not as wide adoption as we kind of expected. So, and yes, that is something that we are recommending for 2024 if you don't feel like you have that figured out. And we have events and follow-up stuff that we'll be sharing about that to help you think through those things and self-serve or ask for help if you want. All right, so what we also said last year is 2024 on the horizon, which is we talked about security. We talked about application vulnerability management. We're going to touch more on that again. That is absolutely a thing. It doesn't necessarily mean everyone's been doing it, but you're looking into this year. Again, this was 2022, looking into 2024. This is absolutely something that needs to be on your radar if you don't have a plan for this. And most MSPs, including Mytech, unless you're specifically engaging in a program to address that, it's not being addressed by patch management. We're going to touch on that a little bit later. Data loss prevention, it's some folks are asking about that. And what this really means is there are policies you can say, if you're leveraging SharePoint in particular, there are policies you can implement to mitigate what people can do with that data. Like they can't share it. If they share it, they can't print it. You get notifications or monitoring on it if somebody's doing something to your data that you don't want, even internally. So there's things like that I think are coming, but we're not even necessarily seeing it widely spread. There are going to be some folks that are interested in that and worried about that, but we're not seeing it quite yet. So we thought it was going to be more of a thing this year, but we actually think it's probably going to be more of a 2025 or beyond for most small businesses. The last thing here on the horizon was really about collaboration and productivity improvements. Absolutely see that happening. We saw more of that last year than we've ever seen, and we see even more of it happening this year. And we're going to touch on what that means here in the 2024 forecast, as opposed to what we were trying to predict or forecast from 2022. Okay. That gives you a little idea of, and the reason why we share this stuff is because it's interesting to reflect back and be like, well, how close were we? Like, were we on par? Were we on target? Because our hope for you is that by attending these sessions, you get validity and validation that the things that we're sharing are real and that there's something that we believe that you should look into and they're important for your organization to evaluate. So that's why we like to do a quick reflection. Plus it's fun to look in the past a little bit. So let's dig into 2024. All right. The 4 business impacting technologies in 2024 that we really want to talk about, or the categories of solutions or challenges, are artificial intelligence. I think when we were preparing for the last session, ChatGPT might have been out for a week or two. So like AI wasn't even a thing when we did the last session, really, in a wide effect. Now it very much is. You're probably tired of hearing about it. In fact, I know sometimes I am. But we do have a couple things that we believe are important for you to pay attention to. So we're going to be pretty specific and prescriptive about that. Again, cyber liability. I put fine print because I do believe everyone should have it. That's what we're seeing from our perspective in the industry. And B, you have to be careful because there's some fine print that's evolving in the cyber liability insurance market that if you don't adhere to might void your coverage, which we don't want to have happen. So we're going to touch on that. And then I figured SharePoint. It gets into, there's so much going on there that has opportunity for improvement and improving communication, et cetera. We're going to dig into that. And then finally, and candidly, this is always going to be something that's on our list because security and what's going on in security and the mitigation to protecting and mitigating risk, it's always going to be evolving and iterating. So we're going to touch on the iterations that we believe are going to be real and impactful in 2024. So those are the high level topics. Let's dig in. All right, artificial intelligence. First of all, I probably don't need to even explain this first section, but like, what are we talking about here? In particular, we're talking about ChatGPT, Microsoft Copilot, which just was launched back in November, Google's version, Gemini, formerly Bard, which you've probably seen in the news lately, had some problems with their image generators. And there's lots and lots and lots of other AI tools, or tools that say they leverage AI. And so really what I'm talking about is not necessarily the tools that, I mean, there might be tools that you buy that leverage AI, and yeah, that's part of the equation too. But I want the next section, the reason why I put it in here is because I want to illustrate the speed at which AI is being adopted and leveraged. And the reason why that's important, I believe, is why you need to pay attention to this. AI is going to be a thing. It's not a fad. It's not going away like the internet. Just kidding. Honorable mention Al Gore. It's going to be real, right? So, and it's happening so fast, it's making us spin. People are asking us to help them with things with AI, but Copilot's only been launched to the small business for 2 months now, not even 2 months. And do you have anybody that's got experience more than 2 months with Copilot in the SMB? Not really, unless you go to like Microsoft themselves. So this is one of the challenges with AI, and so that begs why some of the recommendations we're going to hit on the next slide, but on the next couple slides. But just to give you an example, the speed and the pace at which AI is being adopted. Again, it took 7 years for the internet to reach 100 million users, and you can see the other ones there. But it took AI or ChatGPT 2 months to go to 0 to 100 million users. That is an incredibly rapid pace, and it hasn't stopped. So just know that this is something that is going to affect you. And the one quote that it's been attributed to lots of different people, so I put it in quotes, but I didn't attribute it to anyone in particular, is, and why I put under AI considerations, is look, you're not going to lose your job if you're an individual to AI, but you will, and you might lose your job to someone who knows how to use AI. You could insert or translate this to, you're not going to lose a customer because of AI, but you might lose a customer to AI from someone else who's learning how to use AI. So I do believe that this is an individual job thing as an individual, but also as a company and dealing with competition, as well as because your customers are going to seek out companies that can help them be more efficient. So there are some, there's a session that we did late last year that didn't include Copilot being released yet because it hadn't been to SMB. But it does give you some things. That's going to be one of our follow-ups that we're going to send out to you, is some considerations of how to think about it. Helps you understand a little bit more about what AI is and how it's built, so you can understand it a little bit better, and some resources. But here's our recommendations for this year, what we would say you should do. One, because of the rapid pace of AI, no one's going to spoon feed this to you. And no one's going to tell you exactly how AI is going to benefit your business, or exactly how AI is going to help your business save time. Candidly, you, whoever's listening, or the leadership organization, needs to figure that out. So I would strongly recommend buy some, and the reason why I recommend Copilot is not just because we're a Microsoft organization, but Copilot has done a great job of making sure that one of the big concerns about AI is that you put information into AI, and now it's available to the rest of the world. If you're subscribing to Copilot and you're logged in and authenticated when you're using it, which you basically have to be, that information is containerized just like all of your data inside of the Microsoft ecosystem. So that data is containerized and secured. And so what we recommend is buying some Copilot licenses, form an AI test committee, and I hesitated using the word pilot committee. Seems a little redundant, but get a small group of people in your organization that are interested in digging in and testing and trying and learning, and how can they help you identify ways in which AI can help you save time across your organization, and what roles it might make sense to roll it out to. AI Copilot today costs, you have to pay it annually, but it's $30 a month per person. And so for most people, if it saves them an hour a month, it's probably worth it. So really the short answer that we're trying to coach people on, and we're trying to do internally as well, again, because we're all in the same boat, it's 2 months old right now as far as being released to the SMB, is figure out ways that it can maybe help different roles save at least an hour of time a month. if you can do that, it might be worth investing in it across the roles that you feel it could save time. So anyway, I'm gonna get off the AI soapbox, but we're trying to be very prescriptive about not just all the hype around AI, but really trying to say that I think there's some tangible things you could start doing this year. And one of the things that really, I don't know if it scared us, but it definitely like opened our eyes, is we looked out 3 years into the future with the pace of AI. If we don't start doing something now, 2 years from now, a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, we are going to be woefully behind, and we would potentially be in jeopardy of either our jobs or our clients being lost due to other organizations that have figured out how to leverage AI better. So that's my challenge to you. I'm not trying to spread fear, uncertainty, and doubt, but I do believe these are some tangible, simple, actionable things you could start doing today to start your journey of figuring out how AI could benefit your organization. Okay, next one. Cyber liability insurance fine print. Here are some of the top 4 ways in which your cyber liability coverage could be voided or reduced. The fine print, I tried to put fine print as lower font, so forgive me. I was trying to be cute with that, but I guess it didn't play out in what's showing. But one, when you fill out your cyber liability questionnaire, as far as to be underwritten by the broker or the insurer, make it accurate. If you attest to saying you're doing something, some security measure, some security factor, some security tool that you in theory have in place, and if it's not being used, not executed, not configured properly, et cetera, and you have an incident, and that incident may or may not even have to be caused by that thing, by that item that you maybe attested inaccurately, it could completely void your entire coverage for that incident. So make it accurate, and invest in that, and make sure that you have that information is done correctly. Because if it's not, it puts your whole policy and coverage at risk. One of the second things is that we're starting to see this across. Again, we have a security assessor that digs in a lot of these policies and deals with cyber insurance a lot. And one of the things he mentioned to me is that like the policies are starting to request that you can demonstrate that you have what are called immutable backups. What that means is that you have a copy of your data that is stored in a way that cannot be overwritten or cannot be encrypted or not be ransomed in an encrypted way. Like it should be encrypted, right, in storage, but you have the keys versus ransomware encrypted. And there are a lot of backups. In fact, I remember getting a phone call a couple of years from someone that said, yeah, I had a backup, but it was a USB drive attached to my server and my backup's also encrypted. And then now my offsite storage is encrypted because they're all connected. So there are ways to configure your backup so that if you do get ransomed or do get attacked, you can actually protect the backups, whether it be local or offsite, from actually also being ransomed so that you can recover. So that's one of the things that cyber liability is really looking for. And so if you don't have a solution like that, by the way, if you're a Mytech client using our backup solutions, they meet that requirement. But if you don't have a solution like that, you should look into getting one and just and sometimes it's not even necessary buying anything new, it's just how it's configured. So keep that in mind and ask for help if you'd like it. The third one, which is a really big one, and is lack of timely vulnerability management. So you'll see all the time in the news, this vulnerability or this exploit, et cetera. And you might see reference like CVE, a CVE number. And that is once a vulnerability is known. In fact, there was a major one in our industry that hit a few weeks ago. And we got notice of it and we patched it. We had to mitigate the vulnerability the same day because it was that significant. But once it's known, what cyber liability insurance is doing is saying, like, you have a certain amount of time to respond to that vulnerability or mitigate that vulnerability. And if you wait too long, like after 90 days, I don't know what the thresholds are, and they're probably going to change over time. So don't quote me on what the thresholds are, but maybe it's 30 days, maybe it's 90 days, maybe it's 6 months, then maybe it's three quarters and then a year. But they're reducing. The longer it takes you to mitigate the vulnerability, the more the coverage of your cyber liability policy is reduced. And so it's really important. And again, I'm not saying every cyber liability policy is doing this, but we have seen some that are, and it's a very likely thing to get more widespread, where you might have to be better about vulnerability management and making sure that you are timely, actively mitigating known versus unknown, known vulnerabilities. So we have lots more on that. We're going to be publishing more communication on that, so stay tuned. We also have events that we're talking about that. So there'll be follow-up stuff that can help you educate. I'm not going to go into every single last detail now, but that's also one of the things on the security front that we're going to hit on too. And then finally, not following the cyber liability rules of engagement. The reason why I put that in place is because cyber liability is starting to prescribe not just the steps that you should take to mitigate or if you have an incident, but they also are prescribing potentially who you have to engage in order to mitigate it. So for example, let's say you have a potential incident and it becomes something that's real, like there's somebody has gotten in your system, there is an indicator of compromise. At that, once you know that, they want to be notified, for one. And not notifying them could actually invalidate your policy. They might, like either your internal IT, or if you're working with a third party like us, they might not authorize or approve your internal IT or an outsourced company to do any work. And so if they do the work to try and mitigate it, you could actually invalidate your cyber liability policy, because they want security experts mitigating that risk, because they know it mitigates their liability. So this is also why we talked about building an incident response plan, because you should build an incident response plan that is in alignment with your cyber liability rules of engagement, so that when that happens, you know exactly what to do, what steps to take, and who to involve. You don't want to be figuring that out in the midst of the panic of a fire, of a technology fire, so to speak, with an incident. So that's why not following some of those rules could invalidate your insurance, or at least reduce your coverage. And but by building an incident response plan that is in alignment with that, could help you out. So I see a good question online about insurance, and we can definitely touch base on that. There's Mark, I don't have a specific answer to that question right now, but I can follow up with you. But we can follow up with you. But cyber liability is also very much an evolving space. Because I can tell you that it used to be this land grab, and insurers were thinking, oh, this is free money. Let's sell cyber liability insurance. But then they got to the point where I think it was in like 2020, 2021, where they had to pay out so much because they weren't doing any underwriting. They weren't doing any validation. And so it's very much been rapidly evolving over the last couple of years. And the cost of the premiums, you should evaluate your cyber liability insurance every single year. You should talk to different brokers. You should talk to different carriers, because all of them are evolving and changing. Coverage limits are going, premiums are changing. So again, I'm not a broker. We can definitely introduce you to some folks that we've worked with that have some familiarity in the industry. But in the end, shopping it is the answer. I would definitely recommend shopping it, because it's an immature space from an insurance perspective, and it's rapidly changing. And year to year, you can see different coverage levels and different premium levels that you should shop to protect yourself. So recommendations for cyber liability, other than what I just said about shopping: get it. And if you the other thing I didn't mention here, but I will mention now, is I would also recommend, because of the shopping and because of the rapid changes and the renewals that are happening in cyber liability, we recommend getting 3 to 6 months, at least 3 months, if not 6 months ahead of. Go to your cyber liability to say, hey, I know a renewal is coming up in 6 months. Are there any new requirements that you have of me in order for me to get your best rates, or to make sure that my premiums don't go up? They might be starting to require stuff upon renewal, and instead of making it a fire drill 30 days prior to your renewal, you can get ahead of it. So that's something that we would recommend. And then define your incident response plan. Again, to help with your coverage, to make sure you're not doing something that invalidates your coverage or reduces your coverage, defining that so you know what to do, what steps to take, and who to contact when something like that happens. Hopefully it doesn't happen, but if and when something like that happens, they'll put you in a better spot. All right, so I am being long-winded, weird. I'm going to try and rush through these last couple ones here. SharePoint. So here it is, spring in North America. I was just working with some folks in Australia. So it's North America. It's summer down there. It's spring here. But spring cleanup. Take the attitude of spring cleanup. There are so many organizations, and this is not a shin kick, that went through the pandemic, and people just found a way to get things done. So you have team sprawl, channel sprawl, SharePoint site sprawl, all kinds of sprawl, things that were created, that are built, that are there, that are not being used. Take an opportunity to clean it up. Try and figure out what's being used and not, and maybe get rid of stuff, archives and things. It'll help with sprawl and confusion in your organization. leveraging SharePoint and some of the things in SharePoint and the ways, and especially the next one of navigation and design. If you work on those things, you can improve organizational communication. You can make it way more intuitive for your team to find information that they're seeking, make things easily searchable that they may or may not be today. Those are some huge things you can do with SharePoint. With actually, it'll take some thought and intentionality, but to make the clicks to do that is not that hard. And we host lab sessions to help people with that too. And we have user group sessions that we coach on that. In fact, our next 3 user group sessions over the next 3 months are covering on all that kind of stuff. And then improving culture engagement. There are some really cool capabilities in the Microsoft 365 suite that Microsoft has been evolving recently. And we've worked with some clients doing some cool stuff to improve your culture engagement. So if that's something you're looking to like revamp or overhaul some of the ways in which your organization engages with culture, there's some cool tools that you're probably already paying for in SharePoint that you could leverage that I think could really make it a lot of fun and could improve your culture engagement. So the SharePoint recommendations that follow along with that is just review all your Teams and SharePoint sites. Just dig in, review those channels, figure out what's being used or not, try and declutter. And then similar to AI about educating yourself is if you can identify some power users in your organization, just identify those folks in your organization that want to engage in this stuff, that are interested in it, that like improving it, that like figuring stuff out, and maybe invest in some light education. It doesn't even necessarily mean paid vacation. It's just or paid education, excuse me. It's just time. Go to user group sessions. There's lots of them around. Watch YouTube content. Maybe go to a Microsoft conference, but dig in. And there's so much you can do to self-serve where you don't have to like work with an organization like us to help you, although we can, but you can do it yourself. And there's a lot of information out there. So if you want to make improvements on this front, there's a bunch of free stuff out there that we offer. There's a lot of content out there that you can do, but you can do a lot of this yourself by just identifying some power users and investing in them with some education. All right, I went through that quick. See, that wasn't so bad. All right, the last one that's really important, and I'm going to run a couple minutes long, so forgive me, everybody. But look, security iterations and evolution that's happening. Again, this is going to be a mainstay in our forecast because security and problems and the evolution of security is not going away. The thing that I want to highlight here that's I think a really important message, and this is even to Mytech clients. If you're a Mytech client today and you know that we're taking care of your patch management, it doesn't mean that we're doing vulnerability management. That's really important. We're going to publish more. We have some articles that we've drafted on this, and that we haven't published, but we're going to publish them, and this is going to be part of our follow up to all of you. But vulnerability management is not patch management. And vulnerability management, A, it's becoming a thing with cyber liability insurance, and B, it takes a different level of engagement and investigation and even tool set in order to do it comprehensively. So just stay tuned for more on that. And I'll touch on that a little bit in the recommendations. Email security, DMARC and DKIM. So it doesn't really, in fact, DMARC I think is a C. I think it is a C. I spelled it correctly on the next slide, but not on this one, so forgive me. It's DMARC with a C. Sorry about that. These are security protocols. They've been around for a while, but what's happened recently and why it's a thing in 2024 is that Google and Microsoft have recently started implementing requirements around using DMARC and DKIM, especially, thank you, Stephanie, especially if you're doing email marketing. So if you have like a HubSpot or a MailChimp, or even if you have like an e-commerce site that does email blasts, or if you're using like an invoicing system that does email blasts beyond your Microsoft 365, if that's where your email is. But implementing DMARC and DKIM right now are starting to become requirements to implement. And so, in fact, we're sending a communication to our clients on Monday where we are taking care of all of the DMARC and DKIM records for their Microsoft 365 email sending domains. But there's a lot of those third parties that your MSP might not have visibility to. And so they don't necessarily know whether you're sending through a HubSpot or something like that. So, be aware that it's more than just your, say, Microsoft 365 that's sending this, where these records need to be established. So it's relatively simple to do, and it does improve your email security, which is awesome. And again, there's more content on that. We'll send a blog as a follow-up that'll explain a little bit more about that. But it's a relatively simple thing to do. And while today the requirements aren't such that every single, like Microsoft and Google requirements are more at a higher level, they're more of if you're sending more mass emails out, are they kind of requiring this? But we believe, and why we put it on the forecast, is that you know how this stuff works. They start at a high level, but then they just start ratcheting down the requirements, and eventually, and probably by the end of this year, it's not going to be an optional thing. It's going to be a required thing. So I would get ahead of it. Talk to your marketing people because they might be ones using it. Talk to your finance people. They might be using it. Your sales team might be using a CRM that's hosted that could be sending emails. Get this stuff figured out for your organization. Again, it's probably going to be more work to figure out which things use it than it is implementing it, depending on the situations. Because some software, it's challenging to do it. But in general, it's not a hard thing to do. But just know that you're going to need to do it to keep your email more secure this year and moving forward. The last one is more monitoring, logging, alerting, basically for forensics. And this isn't just a cyber liability insurance thing, but this is when you're trying to investigate whether or not something is a real problem. Like so you might have something suspicious happening, for example, and you're like, well, this is weird, but you're not sure if it's a real problem. You're not sure if it's something else coming into your, like an incident, somebody actually breached or got into your organization. Breach is a bad word, by the way, but you're not sure. Or there is an indicator of compromise and you're trying to investigate it, or you know something happened and you're trying to reverse engineer it. You can't do any of that stuff without having more monitoring, logging, and alerting. The problem is it's not free to do this stuff. And I don't just mean tools. I mean, it costs overhead, it's performance, it's storage. It's all of these things in our technology that might not be built to monitor and alert and log everything. And so what we're seeing is security is starting to incrementally ratchet up the expectations. Cyber liability is going to start playing a role here too, where you're going to have to start monitoring and logging and alerting on more things in order to help with forensics. It also helps with mitigating risk. And I'll give you an example of this. One of the tools that we use internally, we actually don't have this deployed to more than a handful of clients, but we use a tool that limits international logins because we don't work internationally. Well, I just went on a trip. We just went to a conference down to Australia recently. And so by being in Australia and trying to log in, violated a monitoring, alerting, and logging policy that we had in place of not allowing international logins. I got blocked. So our IT team didn't have to do anything. Now, I had to ask them to unblock me, but I was completely locked out because I violated a policy. Now, if that was someone that was trying to be me in Australia versus me in Australia, that's a good thing. And I understand it as an individual getting blocked, why it happened, and like I actually am okay with it. It did create a minor inconvenience, but all we had to do is turn it on for a brief period of time. So there are things that monitoring, alerting, and logging by adding some of these layers can help proactively prevent or in an automated way prevent things from happening, but it also helps from a forensics and reverse engineering and trying to make sure something bad did or didn't happen, or the scope and the scale of what happened. Because if you're in the medical industry, for example, like knowing whether or not the bad actor touched PHI, your health information, if you know that they did or didn't do it, it is either a notifiable event or not, right? So knowing that information is really important. And the way you can have definitive data to prove whether or not that happened is through this stuff, by having more monitoring, alerting, and logging. So that's what we're really seeing into this year. So one, implement DMARC DKIM for email security, get it done. We're doing that again for all of our clients that have a Microsoft 365 domains that send email. It's only for sending email. If you have aliases for receiving, you don't have to worry about those, but it's the sending domain. If there's third parties out there, raise your hand. Make sure you're working on that because it's not just your primary Microsoft 365. It's also all of those entities. Digging into vulnerability management. Vulnerability management is a business risk engagement. The reason, I'll give you an illustration. Sometimes vulnerabilities exist, like there could be a plugin to a browser, for instance, that could have a vulnerability. And we encountered this with one of our clients where there was a browser plugin that had identified a vulnerability. It was on every single one of their machines. And unlike patching, where you just like deploy a patch, to mitigate that vulnerability basically meant removing it. If we removed it, it would have actually basically caused their primary line of business application to stop functioning because their primary line of business application was written and drafted in the current version of that was using that plugin. So vulnerability management isn't one of those things that you can just say, well, why don't you just fix it? Why don't you just turn it off? Why don't you just disable it? Because disabling things in a vulnerability management perspective, not always, but oftentimes are going to cause some sort of negative business impact. And so having that conversation and understanding, well, is this a $5,000 impact? Is it a $50,000 impact? Maybe I need to make sure I go to my third-party software vendor, and maybe we're not on the current version, and we need to up to the current version, which then solves this vulnerability. So it's not as simple as just patching, like you're probably doing, nearly all of us are doing every single month, if not every single week. It's a different level of engagement, and there are business conversations and business decisions that need to be made in order to effectively manage vulnerability management. There's way more to that, but that's what I'm going to talk about today. And then the last one, and this is kind of the honorable mention for 2025 as well, because some will need a security information event manager. That's what SIM stands for. Sometimes security incident event manager, security information event manager. It's basically a place that collects all those logs that I was talking about, where you can get a lot of the alerting, and it can correlate different events and possibly take action on those different events, or at least alert you that something suspicious is happening because you might not necessarily see it. So some industries and so if you're a regulated industry, this is likely going to be more applicable to you sooner than later, and potentially in 2024. We see the world going as these tools become they're getting better about being more cost effective for the SMB, because there's a lot of enterprise tools out there that try to sell into the SMB, and they're just ridiculously expensive. And so we're seeing those prices come down, and we're seeing the requirements go up as far as being able to leverage something like that. So some of you are going to see that this year. Some of you have already seen it in previous years, but we're seeing it. I think we're going to incrementally see over the next 2 years in particular, a lot more wider spread use of something like a SIM solution. And we're going to see more logging and forensics through Microsoft 365. Microsoft has a lot of ability to deliver and log this stuff, but it doesn't necessarily today do a good job of necessarily correlating it or giving you easy reports to look at. So we're seeing the need for some third-party plug-in tools, if that's a requirement that you have, whether it be for a regulatory reason, a compliance reason, or it's just something that you want to do. And cyber liability might start requiring it too. So again, this is the 2025 honorable mention. Some of you are going to experience it this year and may have already experienced it last year, but we think that more and more people over the next year or 2 or 3 are going to experience that. Okay, so let's do the summary. Look, I hopefully didn't beat you over the head with AI. I get too many emails about AI every single day already, but I do believe that there's some very intentional, prescriptive, actionable things that are not terribly time consuming, but I do believe you should start now. Educate yourself, invest in a team, buy some licenses, just a handful of them, and figure out how you can save your team an hour a month. Start there. Just an hour a month. If you can do that, it's probably worth investing, because you'll find more ways. And the tool is going to evolve, and it's going to get better and better. Cyber liability, understand the fine print. Make sure that you adhere to those things. Build an incident response plan that's aligned with your cyber liability, because it could really cause you problems if you don't. And if you have an incident, which I hope you don't, but if you do, you'll be glad that you had that built, so that you have a plan to address it versus having to figure out that plan on the fly. There's so much in SharePoint. We're all human beings. We all could do a better job of communicating and collaborating. We all could probably do a better job and increase in our culture engagement. There's so many things inside of SharePoint that you're probably already paying for that could help you solve some of those problems. So invest in some power users, invest in some of their education, and they will be able to help you drive that forward in your organization. Of course, you can ask for help on any of this stuff too, but I believe a lot of this you can self-serve. And then the last part on security, just beware. It's always iterating. It's always changing. And yes, sometimes it means we have to spend more time. As a business, we're getting pulled in so many different directions of all the different problems we have to solve. But vulnerability management is one of those that you're going to want to pay attention to, and you're going to want to operationalize that inside your organization, just like the HR function, just like the finance function, just like the marketing, sales, et cetera. So just know that that's coming, and I would strongly recommend that you start investing in that this year, as your cyber liability might already start requiring it anyway. So that's the summary. Now, this is the last slide. Join us for future events. We post all this stuff on LinkedIn, and we post a lot of content on our YouTube channel. Love to have you subscribe to those things, because you'll get notified as we go live. Our user groups we host on our YouTube channel, so you get notified of all that stuff. It's all recorded there too. If there's anybody that could benefit from this, please share. Thank you for that. That's part of what we're trying to do is increase awareness so people can self-serve and hopefully be proactive about putting their business in a good position versus reactive. We have plenty of future events that are on our website. And I mentioned in several of the different sections today that there's going to be more content. We have some content already done. We're going to be building more content this year. So we will stay tuned as we'll be following up incrementally with some additional content. We're not trying to bury you with a ton of content that you're not going to be able to digest. This is the summary of it, but stay tuned for more. We're going to be publishing more. Our team's going to be engaging our clients with this stuff more because these are important topics that we want to make sure that you can make informed decisions about how these are going to apply to your business in 2024 and beyond. With that said, thank you so much for attending. I know this is a lot of information, but we do believe that everything we talked about today is going to affect all of you in some way, shape, or form in 2024 or as you're going into 2025. So we want to keep it on your radar so you can keep ahead of it. So with that said, I'll pause and open up for questions. I know Stephanie said there weren't any questions at the moment, but I'll just pause for a moment. And if anybody wants to throw out some questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Thanks for the emoji things. Those are kind of cool. Our new platform, I'm learning our new platform as we go along. The first live session we've hosted in it. So thanks for the emojis. Well, all right. So Stephanie and my team knows that I'm okay with awkward pauses, but I feel I don't want to have too long of an awkward pause because I can't see your faces or see your reactions. Usually I wait till somebody giggles or laughs or adjusts uncomfortably. So with that said, let's adjourn the session. You'll get a follow-up email with the recording and stay tuned for other content that'll hopefully help fill some of the gaps that I wasn't able to cover on all the details that we covered today. And thanks for joining us and stay tuned for future events. We'll talk soon.